She was just supposed to deliver a caramel latte. That's it. No more, no less. 20-year-old Amira Johnson, wearing her faded brown delivery uniform and worn sneakers, stepped into the pristine glass lobby of CrystalByte Technologies, one of the top software firms in downtown Chicago. It wasn't her first time there. She'd been delivering coffee and snacks to the tech execs on the 35th floor for the past 6 months. Nobody ever noticed her. Nobody ever looked her in the eye. To them, she was just the help. Just another young black girl trying to make ends meet. But today would be different. As she waited by the reception desk, she couldn't help but glance at the massive screen mounted on the wall. A group of panicked engineers and anxious executives were huddled together, pointing at flashing lines of code, scrambling through binders, shouting over each other. A red warning message blinked. Critical system failure. $5.3 million loss daily. Amira's eyebrows furrowed. Her eyes locked in. Her mind kicked into gear. Wait. Are they? No. Why would anyone use a linear search with a data stream that volatile? That's a recursion loop waiting to happen, she muttered under her breath. The blonde receptionist snorted. Oh wow, she scoffed. The coffee girl's a coder now? Everyone laughed. But Amira didn't. What they didn't know, what no one in that room could possibly imagine, was that this quiet delivery girl had once been accepted to MIT at just 16 years old. That she had walked away from a full scholarship to care for her disabled younger brother. That she'd spent every night for 4 years teaching herself advanced algorithms from dusty library books and free online courses. And in that moment, she saw the answer. The exact line of code causing the $1 million crash. She saw the fix. And she knew she could solve it in minutes. But when she spoke up, the CEO himself walked in and made a threat so cruel, so shocking, that it would set off a chain of events no one could have seen coming. What happened next would shake the entire company and the internet. Before that moment in the lobby, Amira Johnson was invisible. Not just at CrystalByte, but in most places she walked into. Grocery stores, bank lines, even her community college campus. People saw the uniform, the skin color, the tired eyes, and they made up their minds. But if they had looked closer, really looked, they would have seen someone extraordinary. Amira lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Englewood, one of Chicago's most overlooked and underfunded neighborhoods. The walls were thin, the ceiling leaked every time it rained, and her mattress sat directly on the floor. But she didn't complain. She didn't have time to. By day, she delivered coffee and lunch orders for a food app. By night, she took care of her little brother, Darius, who had been born with cerebral palsy. He was 11, bright as a button, and completely dependent on her for everything. Bathing, feeding, therapy, medicine. Their mother, Carol Johnson, had spent nearly 2 decades working as a night janitor at CrystalByte. She'd raised Amira and Darius on a single income after their father walked out when Amira was 5. Every night, Carol cleaned the offices of people who barely acknowledged her existence. Every morning, she came home with aching joints and swollen feet. Amira grew up watching her mother scrub the marble floors of power, and yet, never be allowed to walk across them with pride. It lit a fire inside her. She devoured books, taught herself coding through online forums, YouTube tutorials, and borrowed textbooks. By 14, she was building mobile apps. By 16, she got accepted into MIT with a full scholarship. But just 2 weeks before move-in day, Carol collapsed at work. Doctors said it was hypertension and exhaustion. At the same time, Darius's medical needs grew more demanding. The reality hit hard. Amira couldn't leave. So she stayed. MIT could wait. Her family couldn't. She didn't tell anyone. Not her old teachers. Not her friends. She just put on her delivery uniform and started working. But that hunger to build, to solve problems, to do something great, it never left her. She carried it in every step. Every delivery. Every night spent fixing broken code just for fun. She knew she was more than her zip code. More than the job she had to do. She was still a technologist. Still a visionary. Just off the radar. So when she stood there in that sleek glass lobby, watching $1 million algorithm fall apart in real time, she didn't see a crisis. She saw an opportunity. But it wasn't just about proving she was smart. It was about proving that people like her, black, poor, female, overlooked, deserved to be in those rooms too, deserved to speak up, deserved to be heard. She'd been quiet her whole life, but today, Amira Johnson was done being invisible. It started with a scoff. When Amira pointed out the flaw in the system, the room full of engineers and executives didn't erupt in applause. They laughed. Not because she was wrong. No one had even checked. They laughed because of who she was. The blonde receptionist smirked and whispered, "She probably just Googled some buzzwords." A junior developer chuckled, "Hey, someone give her a fake badge and let her feel smart for 5 minutes." Their voices dripped with sarcasm. But Amira stood still, eyes fixed on the code. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from frustration. And then, he walked in. Charles Devon, the CEO of CrystalByte Technologies. 52 years old. Tailored suit. Rolex. White hair combed back so sharply it looked like it had been ironed into place. He entered with 2 assistants and an espresso in hand, already annoyed that his engineers hadn't fixed the problem after 6 months and nearly $30 million burned in diagnostics. "What's the hold up?" he barked. One of the VPs began to explain, but then Charles noticed Amira. He raised an eyebrow. "Who's this?" Before anyone could answer, Amira spoke up, calmly, but with purpose. "I believe I found the core issue. Your system's using a poorly structured cache indexing model. You're stacking read-heavy processes on top of a recursive loop. That's why your servers are crashing during simultaneous queries." The silence that followed was nuclear. The entire room turned to stare. Not at the code. At her. Devon blinked. Then slowly, his expression twisted into a cruel, amused grin. "You're the barista girl, right?" he said. "You bring coffee to floor 35? Amira didn't flinch. "Yes. And apparently, I also fix million-dollar problems." That's when the laughter really started. Someone in the back clapped mockingly. A tall man in a gray hoodie muttered, "Damn, that's bold." Devon walked toward her, setting his espresso down. "Tell you what," he said, voice full of disdain. "If you think you're smarter than my top engineers, most of whom hold PhDs by the way, how about a little test?" Amira's jaw tightened. She already knew where this was going. "You have 15 minutes, Devon declared. "Fix the issue. Right here, right now. We'll give you access to the test environment." He paused, letting the silence build. "But if you fail, even a little, you and your mother are banned from this building. Permanently." A gasp escaped from someone in the back. Amira stared at him, stunned. "What does my mother have to do with this?" Devon smiled coldly. "Carol Johnson, night janitorial staff. 18 years. Hard-working lady. But if her daughter thinks she can embarrass this company in broad daylight, well, that kind of insubordination runs in the family, doesn't it?" That was it. The humiliation hit like a slap. Her fists clenched. Her ears burned. But her voice stayed calm. "You want a show," she said. "Fine. But when I'm done, I want you to remember this moment. Not because I fixed your system, but because you made the mistake of judging me before I even touched the keyboard." She stepped forward. The crowd parted. And as she walked toward the terminal, someone in the crowd whispered, "Damn! She's actually gonna do it." And in that moment, the countdown began. Amira sat down at the console. The room was dead silent, except for the hum of servers and the ticking of Charles Devon's luxury watch. The keyboard was slick and unfamiliar, but her fingers didn't hesitate. She cracked her knuckles once, took a breath, and launched the test environment like she'd done it 1,000 times. In truth, she had, on second-hand laptops, public library desktops, and old machines rescued from dumpsters. Behind her, people started whispering, chuckling, filming with their phones. A junior manager leaned in and muttered to his colleague, "This is going to be a train wreck." But Amira wasn't listening. She was seeing. The system's architecture unraveled in her mind like a puzzle she'd solved before. Spaghetti code. Poor memory management. Circular dependencies. It was bloated, tangled, inefficient, like someone had layered updates on top of updates without ever cleaning the foundation. She opened the code editor. Her hands moved fast. faster than most people could read. She started with a memory leak, isolating the recursive loop that had been killing their processing efficiency. Instead of patching it, she rewrote the logic entirely. Then, she built a modular cache handler, lightweight, smart, self-monitoring. She added predictive clustering to handle spikes in simultaneous queries, used asynchronous callbacks to manage user-side rendering, then cleaned up the entire I/O operation to streamline how the system talked to the database. She worked with a rhythm, almost like music. 10 minutes in, the chuckles faded. Now, they were leaning forward, watching, curious, some even impressed. The lead engineer stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Wait, that's not possible," he whispered. "She's rerouting the entire back-end architecture." Another added, "She's cutting out over 200 lines of legacy junk. That's not just optimization, that's a rebuild."
Even Devon, arms crossed and ready to gloat, found himself squinting at the screen. Something was happening. Something big. At minute 12, Amira executed the test script. She stood up, stepped back, and said, "Run it." No drama. No victory lap. Just quiet confidence. The lead engineer hit Enter. On the screen, the simulated server load test fired up. 200,000 simultaneous queries. Every time they'd tried this before, the system buckled after 80,000. Error rates shot through the roof. Crashes followed within seconds. But now, the graph held. 90,000. 110,000. 150,000. No crash. CPU usage stayed steady. Latency dropped. And then, at 200,000 concurrent sessions, the system processed everything in under 4 seconds. No errors. No timeouts. For a moment, no one said a word. Then someone exhaled loudly. "What the hell?" The lead engineer turned to face Amira, stunned. "How did you do that?" Amira shrugged, still catching her breath. "I treated your system like I treat my time. When you don't have much, you learn how to use every second wisely." It hit them. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't luck. This was genius. Pure, undeniable brilliance, wrapped in a delivery uniform. But before the moment could settle, Charles Devon stepped forward, face tight with anger. This was a trick," he spat. "You copied someone else's work. There's no way you wrote that in 12 minutes. Amira turned to him, expression calm but razor sharp. "I can do it again," she said. "Or walk you through every line of code, if you think you can keep up." The room fell silent again. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. She wasn't the coffee girl anymore. She was the one who did what none of them could. Charles Devon's face was red. Not just embarrassed red. Rage red. He paced in front of the terminal like a lion in a cage, jaw clenched, hands trembling slightly. Whether from adrenaline or fury, no one could tell. Around him, the energy in the room had shifted. The smug grins were gone. The phones were still up, still recording, but now the tone was different. No one was laughing anymore. Because deep down, everyone knew what they had just seen. Amira had done the impossible. She hadn't guessed. She hadn't guessed right. She had outperformed a room full of engineers, under pressure, in real time. And Devon couldn't take it. "This isn't real," he snapped. "There's no way someone like you could just walk in here and solve what my team's been working on for months." "Someone like me?" Amira asked, her voice calm but firm. He scoffed. "A coffee girl. A janitor's daughter. What, did you read a couple Reddit threads and decide you were a genius?" Phones in the room were now fully aimed at him. Still, he didn't stop. "You people always think you can just skip the hard work. Just show up and be rewarded for mediocrity," he sneered. Amira blinked. Slowly. Deliberately. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. But others started to shift uncomfortably. A software architect dropped his phone, nervously picking it back up. Someone whispered, "He didn't just say that, did he?" Devon stepped closer, eyes burning. "I built this company from nothing," he hissed. "I'm not about to be humiliated by some delivery girl from the South Side who thinks being clever makes her an engineer." And then, finally, the line.
The one that would ruin him. I don't care if she's black, Latina, Martian. She doesn't belong in this building. This is a company for professionals, not affirmative action projects. A stunned silence fell like a bomb. Even the receptionist, who had mocked Amira earlier, froze. Amira didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't smile. She just looked him dead in the eye and said, "You just said that." In front of 40 witnesses, and at least 12 smartphones. Devon's eyes darted around. For the first time, he realized he'd gone too far. Far enough that even his lawyers couldn't clean it up. But for Amira, this wasn't a breakdown. This was a reveal. And it was only the beginning. Later that night, the glow of the city pulsed through the thin curtains of their small apartment in Englewood. The living room was dim, save for the soft flicker of the TV playing a rerun no one was really watching. The smell of dinner, rice and roasted chicken, still hung in the air. Amira sat at the kitchen table, her hands still shaking from everything that had happened. She'd done it. She'd exposed the system. She'd survived the humiliation. But she also knew this wasn't over. Across the room, her mother, Amira Johnson, moved quietly, washing dishes with the same rhythm she'd used every night for nearly 2 decades. She hadn't said much since Amira got home. Until now. "You okay, baby?" Her voice was soft, but steady. Amira nodded slowly. "I think I just blew up my whole future." Carol wiped her hands, dried them on a faded towel, and sat down across from her. "You didn't blow it up," she said, locking eyes with her daughter. "You just lit a fire under something that needed to burn." Then, without another word, Carol stood up and walked to the hallway closet, the one no one ever touched. From the very top shelf, behind a stack of old photo albums and a box labeled Darius Baby Clothes, she pulled down a dusty cardboard file box. The tape was peeling. The corners were crushed, but the contents inside, explosive. She dropped it gently onto the kitchen table. Amira looked up, confused. "What's this?" Carol let out a tired breath. "Receipts, emails, photos, copies of contracts. I started collecting it all my 3rd year working at CrystalByte. I wasn't trying to be a whistleblower. I was just watching." Amira opened the box slowly. Inside were manila folders, organized by year. Emails printed out showing double books, 2 sets of financial records. Photos of executives snorting cocaine in the executive restroom. Notes about illegal layoffs. Even files labeled client overbilling, with highlighted invoices charged triple what was promised in original contracts. Amira flipped through them in stunned silence. "You collected all of this while you were mopping floors?" Carol nodded. "People don't notice janitors. They talk like we're not even there. Do shady deals in rooms we're cleaning. Leave confidential papers sitting wide open while they go get lunch." "But why didn't you ever tell anyone?" Amira whispered. Carol looked down at her hands. "Because I was scared. Because I had 2 kids and no savings. Because women like me don't usually get to be heard." She paused. "But women like you can change that." Amira's chest tightened. Her mother, who had scrubbed floors at midnight, saved every penny for her kids, never complained when life got cruel, had been sitting on a goldmine of corporate corruption for over a decade. And tonight, she had passed it on. "I didn't raise you to just survive," Carol said quietly. "I raised you to win, but not by stooping to their level. By knowing more, seeing more, and using what you've seen when the time is right." Amira looked down at the files, then back at her mother. "And is it the right time?" Carol smiled. "Honey, that man threatened my job, and yours. After everything I've done for that company, he still saw me as disposable. So yeah, now's the right time." And just like that, a new kind of fire lit in Amira's eyes. The code might have saved the system, but this would take down the empire. 2 days after the meltdown at CrystalByte, Amira's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something in her gut said, "Pick up." "Hello," she answered cautiously. A calm, professional voice replied, "Hi, is this Amira Johnson? My name's Eli Manning. I'm a senior investigative reporter with the Chicago Ledger.
I saw what happened in the lobby, and I think we need to talk." Amira's stomach dropped. "I'm not looking for interviews," she said quickly. "I don't want to be some trending hashtag." Eli chuckled, gently. "I don't want your story. I want your help." That gave her pause. "I've been digging into CrystalByte for over a year now," he continued. "Tax fraud, racial discrimination, insider trading, you name it. But I could never get hard evidence. The board keeps everything tight. Real Fort Knox stuff." Amira hesitated. "And then I saw you," he said. "You walked in, dropped a solution nobody saw coming, and exposed a CEO's racism in front of half the internet. That video didn't just go viral. It opened doors." She was silent for a moment, then said slowly, "I have something. Actually, a lot of something." Eli didn't miss a beat. "Can we meet?" They chose a quiet cafe in Bronzeville. Neutral ground, low traffic, and most importantly, safe. When they sat down, Amira slid over a flash drive and said, "This is just a preview." Eli opened his laptop, plugged it in, and started scrolling. His jaw tightened. "Are these internal audits? Tampered payroll reports? Wait, are those photos of executives doing coke in the office?" Amira nodded. "My mom's been cleaning those floors for 18 years. She saw everything, and nobody ever noticed her." Eli leaned back, stunned. "She's the invisible witness they never saw coming." "Exactly." Just then, the bell above the cafe door rang. A tall, broad-shouldered woman walked in wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a hoodie zipped up to her chin. She sat down next to them and pulled her hood down. Amira blinked. "Wait, I know you." Janet Wu Boudreau, former director of systems architecture at CrystalByte, fired 6 months earlier for conflict of interest. Janet smiled. Tired but focused. "They canned me because I raised concerns about the company's offshore payments and hiring bias. Said I was disruptive. Truth is, I got too close to the truth." She turned to Eli. "I've got backups. Server logs. Internal emails. Time-stamped receipts. I kept everything." Eli looked at both women, stunned. This is a goddamn bomb." Amira leaned in, eyes blazing. "Then let's light the fuse." For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She had allies now. A reporter who knew where the pressure points were. An insider who knew the system from the inside out. And a mother who had watched the empire rot from the ground up. Now they had evidence. Now they had motive. And most of all, now they had momentum. The conference room on the 40th floor of CrystalByte was unlike anything Amira had ever stepped into. Glossy mahogany table. Leather executive chairs. A 180-degree view of the Chicago skyline. At one end, a custom 85-inch display glowed with the CrystalByte logo. It was corporate theater, designed for deals, decisions, and displays of dominance. And today, it would become a courtroom. Amira stood just outside the room, flanked by Eli Manning and Janet Wu Boudreau. Her palms were damp, but her face was calm. She adjusted the simple blazer she borrowed from her mom and nodded to herself. Inside, the full board of directors had gathered, 9 men and women, sharply dressed and clearly agitated. Next to them were 3 high-profile investors, including a rep from a major tech venture firm. At the head of the table stood Charles Devon, in his usual designer suit, feigning control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, projecting his voice, "thank you for being here. As you know, recent events have complicated our public image. Today, we clarify the facts and expose the lies that nearly damaged this company's reputation." Then he gestured toward the door. "Bring her in." Amira stepped through. The board members murmured. Devon continued, condescendingly, "Please welcome the young woman at the center of our recent viral embarrassment, Ms. Amira Johnson, a coffee runner, part-time delivery driver, and amateur coder." Amira didn't flinch. He smirked. "I've invited her here to explain how she miraculously solved a 6-month system error in 12 minutes. But more importantly, to address allegations of data theft and security breaches, committed by her and her mother, a janitorial employee with suspicious access." The tone was clear. This wasn't a discussion. This was an ambush. Amira stepped forward, laid her bag gently on the table, and pulled out a tablet. "If that's how you want to play it, Mr. Devon," she said softly, "then let's play." She tapped the screen. The main display in the room lit up. The CrystalByte logo faded, replaced by a slideshow of evidence. First slide. A series of overbilled client invoices, side by side with tampered accounting logs. Second slide. A screenshot of Charles Devon's email offering to sell proprietary algorithm blueprints to a competitor in Shanghai. Gasps rippled through the room. Devon turned white. You hacked my email." Amira smiled politely. "No. Janet had access. Before you illegally terminated her for doing her job." Janet stepped into view from the corner of the room. Third slide. Video footage from 6 months earlier. Devon in a bar, bragging to 2 executives about outsourcing innovation and skimming a little extra on the side. Fourth slide. Audio recording of Devon's racial outburst from the lobby. Clean. Unedited. Time-stamped. A board member pushed back from the table. "Jesus Christ." An investor stood. "You said she was lying. That it was doctored." Amira's voice cut through. "I fixed your system because your best minds couldn't. I spoke up and your CEO tried to destroy me, and my mother, for it. But what he didn't realize was that the girl he called a coffee runner was watching, listening, and prepared." Devon lunged forward, sweating. "You don't get to walk in here and try to take me down. I built this company from scratch." Amira tilted her head. "No, you built it on other people's silence." One of the board members, a stern woman in a blue pantsuit, stood up. "Mr. Devon," she said coldly, "you are suspended immediately, pending a full investigation." Security was already in the hallway. They stepped in without needing to be called. Devon shouted, "This is a setup. I'm the victim here. I'll sue every one of you." But no one listened. He was escorted out. And as the doors closed behind him, Amira sat down for the first time. This time, at the head of the table. And for the first time in the company's history, every voice in the room was listening to hers. The room was still spinning from what had just happened. 1 minute, Charles Devon had been barking orders like a king on a throne. The next, he was being escorted out of the boardroom like a man caught sneaking out the back door of his own empire. And in the silence that followed, every eye turned to Amira Johnson. She didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Her presence was louder than any words she could have said. At the far end of the table, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, Robert Eastman, chairman of the board, cleared his throat. "Well," he said, leaning forward, "I believe we just witnessed the most thorough takedown of a corrupt CEO in this company's history." A few board members nodded slowly. Others still looked stunned, like they were trying to recalibrate their reality. Eastman continued, "You didn't just fix our system, Ms. Johnson. You exposed a rot that none of us had the guts or the access to see. You risked your reputation, your safety, your mother's job." He paused. "And now we'd like to offer you one." Amira blinked. "Excuse me. We want you to come on board," Eastman said. "Immediately. We'll start with a consulting position in systems engineering. Full pay, full benefits. You'd work directly with our transition team." Amira hesitated. Her heart was pounding, not with fear, but with disbelief. "You want me working here? After everything?" Another board member chimed in. "That's exactly why we want you. You didn't do this for revenge. You did this for justice, for truth. And frankly, that's the kind of leadership we need right now." Janet nudged her gently. Eli gave a small nod from across the room. Amira glanced at her hands, the same hands that had carried lattes and sandwiches up 35 floors a dozen times a day. The same hands that had typed out a solution in 12 minutes that saved the company over $100 million. She smiled, softly. "If I do this," she said, "I do it my way. Transparency, inclusion, and no one gets dismissed because of their background." Eastman returned the smile. "Then welcome aboard." And just like that, the girl they laughed at in the lobby was now shaping the future of the company from the inside. Not as a token,
Not as a symbol, but as a force. 6 months later, CrystalByte Technologies didn't just look different, it felt different. The sterile, stiff corporate hallways that once smelled of cold steel and ego now buzzed with new energy. Collaboration spaces had replaced corner offices. Laughter echoed where tension once lived. The company was no longer just recovering, it was evolving. And right at the heart of that change was Amira Johnson. At just 21 years old, she had become the company's youngest director of innovation. And, according to Wired magazine, one of the most important new voices in tech. But she didn't care about the titles. She cared about the work. Every morning at 7 a.m., she still rode the L train from Englewood to downtown Chicago. She refused the company car. "Let me earn that the real way," she'd said, grinning. She still brought lunch to her mom twice a week. Carol Johnson no longer worked nights. She had retired, on Amira's insistence, with full health benefits and a surprise pension fund built out of Amira's signing bonus. "I just wanted to give you the peace you never had," Amira had told her. Her younger brother Darius now had 24/7 care, and a brand new tablet filled with learning games coded by his big sister. But perhaps Amira's proudest accomplishment wasn't in the code. It was in the plaque mounted at the front of CrystalByte's HQ. It read, "The Amira J. Innovation Center. Because genius doesn't always come in a suit." The space served as a hub for underrepresented youth in STEM. Every weekend, Amira taught coding workshops to high schoolers from the South Side. She made sure the interns came from real neighborhoods, not just Ivy League pipelines. She even launched a mentorship initiative, named after her mother, the Carol Program, designed to train and support women of color in tech leadership roles. The media had gone wild, of course. Interviews, podcast requests, a TEDx talk. She turned down more than she accepted. "I'm not here to be famous," she told one outlet. "I'm here to make sure nobody like me ever feels like they don't belong in rooms like this." Her office was simple. No private bathroom, no executive couch, just 2 whiteboards, a stack of sticky notes, and a giant monitor filled with messy code. The door stayed open. One afternoon, while giving a tour to visiting students, a freshman asked, "What's it feel like being in charge now?" Amira smiled, took a breath, and looked around at the space she helped rebuild. "You know," she said, "for years, people only saw me as someone who delivered things. But turns out, I was always delivering value. Just took the right moment for the world to see it." And that's what she had become. Not just a tech prodigy, not just the woman who took down a corrupt CEO, but a living example that innovation, intelligence, and integrity don't come from titles. They come from truth. And Amira Johnson? She was now living her truth, out loud, unapologetically, and without asking anyone for permission ever again. Charles Devon used to rule from the top floor. Now, he lived in a 1-bedroom apartment just off a noisy street in Cicero, Illinois, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place. 6 months ago, he had 5 personal assistants, 3 luxury cars, and an office with a private elevator. Today, he drove a used 2009 sedan with a cracked windshield and answered emails for a startup that barely had a website. They paid him per project, and only if they didn't ghost him first. The tech world had turned its back on him. Every investor pulled out. Every job offer disappeared the moment someone Googled his name. Clips of his racist outbursts still floated around TikTok and Reddit, tagged under hashtags #OUnhinged, hashtag TechTyrant, and hashtag KarmaInCode. Even his old country club revoked his membership. His wife filed for divorce 3 weeks after his arrest, taking half of what little remained. His children stopped returning his calls. Charles Devon, the man who once laughed at a young black woman for daring to speak up, now couldn't get a meeting at a local co-working space. But the cruelest twist? Every time he opened LinkedIn, he saw headlines about Amira Johnson. Her face on magazine covers. Her voice at conferences. And no matter how many times he tried to convince himself it was all unfair, deep down, he knew. She hadn't destroyed him. He did that all by himself. And for a man who once thought he owned the world, that was the hardest truth of all. The auditorium at MIT was packed to the rafters. Rows of students in hoodies and glasses leaned forward, eyes wide. Professors stood at the back, arms crossed, but curious. Cameras streamed the event live. The room buzzed with energy.
And then she walked in. Amira Johnson, dressed in a charcoal blazer, jeans, and white sneakers. Same one she wore the day she rewrote CrystalByte's broken system. The applause began slow, then thundered. She smiled humbly, stepped up to the podium, and adjusted the mic. 6 years ago, she began, I got accepted to this very school. Full ride. I had my dorm picked out. I even knew what color I wanted to paint the walls. A few students chuckled. But I never got to move in. She paused. My mom collapsed from exhaustion. My little brother needed care. And the truth is, we couldn't afford for me to leave. Not emotionally. Not physically. So, I stayed home. I picked up 2 jobs. And I learned how to code between bus rides, library hours, and dinner shifts. The room was silent. And if you're wondering whether I regret not coming here. She looked up, eyes locked on the crowd. I don't. Because if I had walked through these doors 6 years ago, I might never have walked into the one place that tried to keep me out, the CrystalByte lobby. A murmur of recognition ran through the crowd. What happened there wasn't a lucky moment. It was years of being underestimated, unheard, and invisible, finally colliding with preparation. It was the moment I realized, you don't have to be invited into the room to own it. A student raised their hand. What would you say to someone who feels like they'll never be enough, because of where they're from, how they look, or what they've lost? Amira took a breath. I'd tell them this. There will be people who see your skin color, your zip code, your clothes, and assume you don't belong. Let them. Then show up, stay sharp, and blow their minds anyway. The room broke into applause. She raised her hand one last time. Genius isn't defined by grades or degrees. Genius is showing up when no one expects you to. It's being told you're not enough and proving them wrong, with grace, with grit, and with code. She stepped back from the podium. And in that moment, the girl who never got to move into MIT gave the speech no one would ever forget. Amira Johnson's story isn't just a feel-good moment. It's a blueprint. A reminder that genius doesn't always wear a lab coat, sit in a corner office, or carry a resume full of Ivy League credentials. Sometimes, genius wears worn-out sneakers and shows up with a delivery bag, and still rewrites the rules of the game. So what can we learn from her journey? First, never underestimate anyone based on what they do for a living. The person delivering your coffee might be building an algorithm at night. The janitor might know more about your company's culture than your HR department. Respect is not earned by titles. It's owed by humanity. Second, adversity is not the end. It's a teacher. Amira didn't have the resources. She didn't have the network. She didn't have the privilege. But she had grit. She used what little she had, free internet, public libraries, overheard conversations, and turned it into power. Third, when you're invisible, you see everything. Amira's mother, Carol, was overlooked for years, and yet she collected the very truth that brought down a corrupt empire. Sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from the quietest corner of the room. And finally, real success isn't about revenge. It's about transformation. Amira didn't just prove them wrong. She made space for others to be right. She used her platform to open doors, build programs, and remind people that you can rise high without stepping on anyone to get there. So wherever you are right now, in a classroom, a night shift, or stuck in a job that feels too small for your dreams, remember this. You don't need permission to be powerful. You don't need a title to lead. And your moment, it's not coming someday. It's waiting for you to show up, just like Amira did.